Good morning, everyone. This is our workshop on the eviction process itself. My name is Elena Popp. I am the Executive Director of the Eviction Defense Network. Buenos días, mi nombre es Elena Popp. Soy la directora de la Red de Defensa de Desalojo. This workshop is going to be in English and Spanish today. El taller va a ser en inglés y en español hoy día. And it is being recorded. La estamos grabando. So the eviction process is long and it is complicated and it can be stressful, but as someone pointed out during the introductions, the title of this workshop is The Eviction Process, Turning a Negative into a Positive. It doesn't have to be as scary as people think. And with the right representation and the right handling, the eviction process can improve your housing situation either by getting the landlord to do the right thing, stop harassing you, stop violating the law, and preserving your housing, or by giving you the opportunity to move into a better housing situation. Evictions are litigation. They are a lawsuit. I was at a meeting yesterday and someone asked if they had been sued by the landlord yet. And one of my clients said no, but she's in the middle of an eviction and she's been in that eviction for 2 years. So wondering what she thought was going on. So yes, evictions are lawsuits. They're lawsuits like much other lawsuits, except they run a lot faster. So everything is on a faster schedule than a normal case. Desalojos son demandas. Uno está en corte, uno ha sido demandado, pero son demandas que corren mucho más rápido que casos normales. Evictions start with a notice. Desalojos empiezan con una notificación. It can be a 3, a 30, a 60, 120, 15. It can be any number of days. Puede ser cualquier cantidad de números. To do something or leave. Hacer algo o salirse. Usually it's phrased this way. 3-day notice to pay or quit. Notificación de 3 días para pagar o salirse. La palabra en inglés es quit. Sometimes it says vacate instead of quit. Sometimes it says terminate tenancy. A veces dice vacate o terminar el inquilinato. It all means the same thing. Todo tiene que, es la misma cosa. If you don't do what the notice says in the number of days given to you in the notice, the only thing that the landlord can legally do is file a summons and complaint for eviction. Legalmente, lo único que puede hacer el dueño es archivar una citación judicial o en inglés summons y complaint o queja para desalojo. We call it unlawful detainer. Lo nombran detención ilegal, unlawful detainer, but it really means it's an eviction action. Es un caso de desalojo. The summons is what gives the court power over you. La citación judicial o summons es lo que le da poder al dueño sobre el inquilino. Without the summons, the case can't move forward. Sin la citación judicial, el caso no puede adelantar. At the beginning of the pandemic, between April 6th and October 5th, for those months, the court was not issuing a summons, except in nuisance cases. La corte no daba citaciones judiciales, con la excepción de casos de molestias graves. And because of that, the number of eviction filings in LA County dropped from 3,381 a month, which is our pre-COVID number for 2019, to 458 a month. A raíces de esa ley, de esa regla, que le decíamos regla 1, la cantidad de desalojos legales en el condado de Los Ángeles redució de 3,381 al mes a 458 al mes. And then the governor has stepped in with his protections, and starting with AB 3088. Y luego el gobernador interfirió con sus protecciones, empezando con la ley AB 3088. And the court started issuing summonses. But the protections in that law and in its successor, SB 91, and the successor after that, AB 832, the 3 state laws, pero las protecciones en esas 3 leyes estatales still kept the evictions down. They went from 458 average a month to 1,000 average a month. De 458 promedio por mes a 1,000 promedio por mes. So when people say the moratorium has ended or the moratorium is protected or they can't evict me because of a moratorium, there's never been a moratorium. Nunca ha habido una moratoria. What there have been is protections that you have to take action in order to be protected by. Han habido protecciones y el inquilino tiene que tomar acción para tomar ventaja de esas protecciones. And those protections have helped. Y esas protecciones sí han ayudado, with the one that we had from April to October being very effective. La que teníamos de abril a octubre del 20, muy efectiva. And the ones that we had from October until the end of September, a couple of weeks ago, 9 days ago, less effective. Y las protecciones de el fin de septiembre hasta el 1 de octubre, menos efectivas. And right now we're in a let's wait and see. Y a ver, ahorita estamos en una, pues a ver qué va a pasar. Protections, some protections have ended, algunas protecciones han terminado. Are we going to see an increase in evictions? Vamos a ver un incremento en desalojos? We're still not sure. For details on what these protections are, 1 o'clock. Para detalles sobre estas protecciones, vengan al taller de la 1. Come to the 1 o'clock webinar. I can tell you anecdotally that we are seeing a slight increase in evictions in the last 9 days. Sí hemos visto un incremento pequeño. One of the things that still remains in the state law is that the landlord cannot get a summons unless they swear that they're participating in the rental assistance program under penalty of perjury. El dueño no puede obtener la citación judicial si no juran que están participando en el programa estatal para ayuda de reubicación. And so that is going to be a bit of a protection for a lot of people. Eso va a ser una protección para muchas personas. When I say that the only thing the landlord can legally do when this notice expires is file a summons and complaint for eviction, cuando digo que lo único que puede hacer es empezar este proceso de desalojo, the landlords can illegally lock you out, and many do. Los dueños pueden echarlos ilegalmente y muchos lo hacen. There are several people on this webinar who are being harassed by their landlords. Hay mucha gente en este webinario que están siendo sujetados a mucho hostigamiento, lots of notices, muchas notificaciones, threats to evict, amenazas de desalojar. What I can tell you about that is that you absolutely need to join your tenant association, and if someone can put that up on the chat, alguien va a poner en el chat cómo enlazarse con su asociación de inquilinos, and a statewide organization like ACE or Tenants Together, o una organización a nivel estatal como ACE o Tenants Together. Stopping harassment, stopping illegal lockouts is being done primarily by the tenant associations, the tenants unions, organizations like ACE. El proceso de parar hostigamiento y parar desalojos o bloqueos ilegales ha sido el trabajo durante la pandemia de los sindicatos de inquilinos y de organizaciones como ACE. Los contactos los van a poner en el chat. The contacts are going up in the chat. Why? Because there aren't enough lawyers to file these lawsuits, porque no hay suficientes abogados para archivar estas demandas. And since there aren't enough lawyers to file these lawsuits, we have to rely on other mechanisms. Como no hay suficientes abogados, tenemos que que tener fe en otros mecanismos, and frankly, more effective mechanisms, francamente más efectivos. Estos mecanismos han sido efectivos. At the beginning of the pandemic, if a landlord tried to lock out a tenant, I put out a alert to something called rapid response, and 20 people would show up, confront the landlord, put the tenant back in, wait for the police to come, advocate for the tenant stayed in place. Al principio de la pandemia, si un dueño trataba de hacer un bloqueo ilegal contra un inquilino, teníamos, y lo tenemos todavía, pero hay menos respuesta. Hacíamos una llamadita por medio de texto. Cientos de activistas llegaban más o menos 10 a 20, se enfrentaban con el dueño, si ya estaba fuera el inquilino, lo metían de vuelta y se quedaban ahí porque el dueño llama a la policía, nosotros nunca llamamos a la policía, llega la policía, abogan para el inquilino y se resuelve a favor del inquilino la situación. We're getting less response from Rapid Response because it's an all-volunteer organization. People are tired, and the number of illegal lockouts has increased by 75% during the pandemic. Estamos teniendo menos participación en ese sistema porque son puros voluntarios y la cantidad de casos es grande, un incremento de 75% de bloqueos ilegales ahora que antes de la pandemia. But if you join your tenants union, si son miembros de su sindicato de inquilinos, if you join ACE, si son miembros de ACE, and your landlord tries to illegally lock you out, y el dueño trata de ilegalmente echarlos, these organizations definitely defend their own members, defienden sus propios miembros. So please get involved, háganse miembros. It's a benefit to you, es un beneficio a ustedes, and it is also a benefit to the general tenants' rights movement y también un beneficio al movimiento de inquilinos en general, so that the tenants' rights movement will grow, para que el movimiento crezca. But back to the legal eviction process, regresando al proceso legal. So the landlord files a summons and complaint. If you do nothing, the sheriff will come and lock you out. And this route here takes 14 to 21 days. Si hacen nada, el alguacil o sheriff va a venir a echarlos. Y esta ruta toma 14 a 21 días. If you answer, si contestan, a whole bunch of stuff happens right here. Una bola de cosas pasa aquí. I'm going to explain what that stuff is. Lo voy a explicar en el taller. And eventually, a trial date is set. Y eventualmente se programa una fecha de una audiencia. The first trial date is usually more like a negotiation session. La primera fecha es más como una sesión de negociación. And for a lot of reasons, including the fact that both sides of the lawyers, the landlord's lawyers and the tenant's lawyers, have high volume of cases. Ambos lados de los abogados, los de inquilinos y los de los dueños, tenemos demasiados casos. So often we need a continuance or they need a continuance. Nosotros necesitamos una continuación o ellos necesitan una continuación. And sometimes both sets of lawyers are ready to go and there's no judge because there's only 33 judges handling all these cases. Y a veces ya ambos lados están listos y no hay un juez porque ambos lados están listos, pero nada más hay 33 jueces y a veces no hay un juez. So cases get continued, se continúan. How many times? I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, a veces hasta 8 veces. And during the course of those continuances, I think both sides soften their settlement positions. Y a veces ambos lados se ablandan un poquito para poder llegar a un acuerdo. A big part of this workshop is about helping you decide what the best thing for you is in a settlement. Mucho de lo que voy a hablar en este taller es cómo el inquilino decide cómo llegar a un acuerdo. What are the elements of that settlement? ¿Cuáles son los elementos? So eventually, though, if it isn't settled, eventualmente, si no hay un acuerdo, there will be a trial. Va a haber un juicio. And there will be a judgment. Y va a haber un juzgamento. And either the tenant will lose and go down this road with the sheriff locking them out. El inquilino va a perder siguiendo esta ruta donde viene el sheriff, or the tenant will win and stay in possession. O el inquilino va a ganar y mantenerse en posesión. Okay. And during this workshop, I'm going to talk a lot about what makes it a winning case or a losing case. Voy a hablar sobre cómo sabemos si se puede ganar o se puede perder. For now, though, I think you should know a couple of things. Deben de saber unas cuantas cosas. Our overall success rate is 98%. That's not a guarantee, but it does show we know what we're doing. Sobre todo, tenemos un éxito de 98% en nuestros casos. No es una garantía, pero sí sabemos lo que estamos haciendo. Success is defined as either winning and the tenant stays in possession. Éxito es ganamos y se queda en posesión el inquilino, or reaching a settlement where the tenant either meets their goals or is put in a better housing situation. O un acuerdo donde el inquilino alcanza sus metas o se encuentra en una posición mejor en su vivienda. Our overall win-loss rate in 2019 was 89% at trial. Nuestro ganar o perder en juicio en 2019, 89%. We in 2019. We didn't do a lot of trials in 2020. No hicimos muchos juicios en el 2020. In 2021, our success rate is, we've done, I believe, 7 trials and 1 5 lost 2. Hemos hecho 7 juicios, ganamos 5, perdimos 2. So just to give you an idea, para darles una idea. Again, not a guarantee. This is the same process in a little bit more complicated or detailed view. Es el mismo proceso aquí, un poquito más detallado. Again, the process starts with a notice, any number of days. I'll explain the different notices in a minute. El proceso empieza con una notificación, muchos diferentes cantidades de días. Voy a explicar en un minuto cuáles son esas notificaciones. We, and this is very important for all of you to hear, we do not open cases at the notice stage. No abrimos casos al punto de desalojo. I had someone tell me yesterday, I was trying to find their case in my system and they were appearing on the screen with a different name. Please don't do that. It's very confusing. And I couldn't find them. And I asked her, am I your lawyer? And she said, yes. It turns out I've talked to her once at office hours. She's attended 1 clinic and I don't have a retainer agreement with her. We don't have an open case. No estamos abriendo casos en esta etapa. Y ayer tuve una persona que me dijo que insistía que era mi abogada y había entrado en la pantalla con un nombre diferente al que había entrado antes y no lo encontraba. Y resulta que no, había asistido a un par de talleres y venido a office hours una vez. Y eso no quiere decir que soy su abogado. At this stage of the game, and I'm going to explain it to you very clearly, and we're going to put the links. At this stage of the game, there are so many of you that there is no way to open cases for all of you. Hay tanta gente que no hay manera de abrir casos para todos. That's why we have these workshops. Por eso tenemos estos talleres. Right now, I want you to pretend that you asked me, Elena, what's going to happen in my case? and that I'm explaining it to you and only you. Quiero que hagan que ver que me preguntaron, ¿qué va a pasar en mi caso? Y se los estoy explicando exclusivamente a ustedes. What happens in the workshops is that you walk away from your screen, you go make a cup of coffee, you make breakfast for your kids, and you're on the screen, but you're not really paying attention. Están en la pantalla, pero no están prestando atención porque andan haciendo cosas en la casa, haciendo café, haciendo desayuno. You're not going to get the same thing out of it if you're wandering around doing other things and if you're really sitting glued to the screen. No van a tener la misma, el mismo éxito si andan haciendo otras cosas. No van a absorber la información igual. Okay. I am talking to you individually. Estoy hablando con ustedes individualmente right now. Everyone, please put yourselves on mute. Por favor, pónganse en mudo. At the end of the usually we don't have time at the end of this presentation, although I think I'm going to make some time today. We do one-on-ones. Hacemos consultas uno a uno. You can also get a one-on-one consultation after the 1 o'clock presentation. También pueden tener una consulta uno a uno después de la presentación de las uno. So, Jalen, can you put those links back up again for the 1 o'clock presentation? Ahí en el chat está el enlace para la presentación de la 1. If you don't, if you're not clear and you don't have your question answered, I also do one-on-ones on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. También hago uno a uno, lunes, miércoles y sábado. Perdón, y viernes. Lunes, miércoles y viernes. Starting at 6 o'clock, empezando a las 6. Depending on how many people come on, you can either get a nice 20 minutes with me, sometimes more. Dependiendo en cuánta gente está ahí, podemos hablar unos 20 minutos, a veces más. And sometimes I have to go really fast. Y a veces tengo que ir muy rápido. Ari, can you please mute yourself? Ari, por favor, se pone en mudo. What is important for people to realize, though, is that that's how you're going to get help until the summons and complaint is filed. Así es como van a recibir ayuda antes de que se archive la queja de desalojo. Once the summons and complaint is filed, theoretically, we will assign a lawyer to you. Ya que se archive la queja de desalojo, en teoría vamos a apuntarles un abogado. We are working very hard to make that be the case in the courts that we cover. Estamos trabajando muy duro que eso sea el hecho en la cortes que mi agencia cubre. My agency is the Eviction Defense Network. Mi agencia es la red de defensa de desalojos o Eviction Defense Network. The courts we cover are downtown LA, Pasadena, West Covina, and Compton. But for Compton, you have to be an LA resident to qualify. Las cortes que cubrimos son la de downtown, Pasadena, West Covina, y la de Compton, pero para la de Compton tienen que ser un residente de la ciudad de Los Ángeles para que sea elegible. Now, we are starting to reach capacity. Estamos ya a capacidad. And if too many cases come in at the same time, we are starting to turn people away. Si demasiados casos llegan al mismo tiempo, estamos empezando a rechazar casos. And that started happening this week. Eso empezó esta semana. We rejected 2 people this week. Rechazamos 2 casos esta semana. When we reject you, we refer you to one of 11 other agencies that are part of our same coalition. Cuando rechazamos a alguien, lo mandamos con una de las otras, somos 11 agencias, oficinas legales, en esta coalición. The coalition is called the Right to Counsel Coalition, and it's running a program called Stay Housed LA. Es la Right to Counsel, la coalición al derecho a un abogado, y tenemos un programa que se llama Stay Housed LA. But we are now finding that most of our allies are also at capacity, pero muchos de nuestros aliados están en capacidad, and in which case we're going to have to refer to the private bar. En dado caso, vamos a tener que involucrar abogados privados. They charge, cobran. But it is important that we figure out how to get everyone represented. Es importante que descifremos cómo lograr abogados para todos, because 99% of tenants that go to court alone lose, porque 99% de los inquilinos que van a corte solos pierden. So, I am making it a priority to represent people that are consistent attendees of these workshops, because I think you will ultimately be easier to represent. Sí es una prioridad representar a todos los que están asistiendo a estas reuniones, so please keep coming. But I know there's at least one of you here today, and if everybody could please mute, por favor póngase en mudo. Hay al menos una persona aquí that has been a regular attendee, and we had to say no to her this week. Y tuvimos que decir no esta semana. And I'm still working at figuring out how we're going to get her represented. Todavía estoy tratando de descifrar cómo le vamos a lograr representación. Okay, so again, 99% of tenants that go to court alone lose. The actual figures are about 49% pre-pandemic of people who got eviction notices could not even figure out how to get an answer filed. They couldn't get to this point and lost automatically. And of the ones that got to this point and filed an answer, 99% lost if they didn't have lawyers. When you compare that to a 98% success rate with a lawyer, it's a no-brainer. You need a lawyer. That's why we have a right to counsel coalition. En realidad, las estadísticas son de que pre-pandemia, 49% de la gente que recibía un desalojo ni siquiera sabía cómo entregar una respuesta. Ni siquiera llegaban aquí y perdían automáticamente. Y los que llegaban aquí y seguían esta ruta, 99% pierden si no tienen abogado. Así es que necesitan tener un abogado, es sin duda, ¿ok? So, you need to pay attention to your mail. Tienen que poner atención a su correo. We live in a world where we do so much online that a lot of people don't check their mail very regularly. Hacemos tanto en línea que mucha gente no revisa su correo. Plus, many of us have unlocked mailboxes. Muchos tenemos cajas de correo que no se cierran. And we have had cases where the court and the lawyer for the other side sent lots of papers, and our client claims they got not one. Tenemos casos donde la corte y el abogado del dueño manda muchos papeles y el cliente nos insiste que no recibieron ni siquiera uno. Is the landlord lurking and catching the mail carrier and stealing your mail so you don't know about the process and get evicted? Está ahí vigilando cuando venga el cartero para robar la correspondencia para que no tengan chance de defenderse en corte y terminen aquí. I don't know, but you should know when your mail carrier is coming. If you're in conflict with your landlord, you should be attentive to your mail. You should get it right away so that you don't miss anything, including this courtesy notice. Ustedes tienen que hacer muy atentos a su correspondencia, saber cuándo viene el cartero, sacar la correspondencia luego, para evitar que no reciban una correspondencia importante, especialmente esta nota de cortesía. The minute that the landlord files the summons and complaint, el día que archiva la queja de desalojo el dueño, the court, I'm sorry, will send you this courtesy notice. La corte les va a mandar una carta de cortesía. So it could arrive before or after the summons and complaint arrives. Puede llegar antes o después de la queja de desalojo. This comes in the mail. Esto viene en el correo. It's 2 pages, sometimes 3. Son 2 páginas, a veces 3. And it alerts you that you are going to get handed a thicker packet. Mo, Maday, por favor, póngase en mudo. You're going to get handed a thicker packet that has the summons, the complaint, the notice, sometimes evidence, sometimes, and often many other papers. Es un paquete grueso que tiene la citación judicial, la queja de desalojo, muchos otros papeles, y es grueso y viene a la puerta. You have 5 days from when you get the packet itself to file an answer, 5 working days. Tienen 5 días hábiles del momento que reciben el paquete más grueso, 5 working days. And if you don't, you're going to go fast on this route to the sheriff. Y si no archivan, van a ir rápido en esta ruta que viene el sheriff. If you do, then the process will take significantly longer. Si contestan, el proceso es significativamente más grande. People are always asking me to predict how long it's going to take. La gente me pregunta que prediga cuánto va a tomar. Well, truthfully, I don't read minds and I don't predict the future. No leo mentes y no predigo el futuro. Right now, it's taking about, I would say, 9 months. Ahorita más o menos 9 meses from here to move out. De aquí hasta que se resuelva, or resolution, hasta que se resuelva. In some cases, I mean, we've got cases on our docket that were filed in 2019 still. Some in 2020. These are unusual cases. Tenemos casos del 19, algunos del 20. And so it really depends on many factors. Dependen muchos factores. Things can also change all of a sudden. Pueden cambiar las cosas. You know, what if, well, actually, I don't want to give the other side any ideas about how things might change, but I can think about 20 ways that they could uh, speed up this process, and time helps our clients. And so we need time for people to be able to stabilize and figure out what they're going to do. Necesitamos tiempo para que nuestra gente se estabilice y descifre qué es lo que van a hacer. There are motions that you can do here that we don't do. You might hear about them, but we don't do them. Hay peticiones que pueden hacer aquí que nosotros no hacemos. Y quizás han oído y a veces nos preguntan, ¿por qué no hacemos esta petición que alguien me dijo? People tell us, why don't we do this? That someone told me about a motion to quash. Alguien me dijo de una petición para quash. We don't do them. And the reason we don't do them is it just allows the landlord to fix their errors. No solamente permiten que los dueños compongan los errores que han hecho, and then we end up here anyways. Y acabamos aquí de todos modos. It takes time, energy, resources to do these motions. Toma tiempo, energía, recursos hacer estas peticiones. And we're trying to help as many people as possible so we don't waste our time, energy, and resources on these motions. No desperdiciamos nuestro tiempo, energía y recursos en esas peticiones that just result in the answer being filed a little bit later, usually about 20 days later, que resultan en 20 días más para poder archivar la respuesta. And it's not worth it. That 20 days is not worth it to do this. Also, the judges hate it when the defendants do these motions. No les cae bien a los jueces cuando se hacen estas peticiones, because it clogs up the court more, porque también estanca la corte más. And then the judge is annoyed with you, and that's not ever a good thing. Y se irrita el juez y la pura verdad no vale la pena. It's not worth it. So we jump directly to filing an answer. And I'm going to show you an answer right in a few minutes. Les voy a mostrar una respuesta en unos minutos. And after that, we propound discovery. Mandamos lo que se le dice descubrimiento. It's basically asking them to tell us everything they've got against you, para que nos den toda la evidencia, todos los testigos que tienen contra ustedes. And sometimes they propound discovery on us, y a veces ellos nos piden la misma cosa. And when discovery is over, either side can do it, but we don't do it. They usually do it. Request a trial. Se pide una audiencia. And then we get the notice of that trial. Recibimos la notificación de esa audiencia. We will call you. We will tell you that you have to be there or not be there. Les llamamos, decimos si tienen que venir ahí, estar presentes o no presentes. In the outlying court, the way we usually do it is we put all our clients on Zoom, and then we share the screen so you can see what's happening in the courtroom. Ponemos nuestros clientes en Zoom y compartimos la pantalla para que puedan ver lo que está pasando en la corte. We are not going to court, or very rarely are we going to court in person. No estamos yendo en persona. We do it through a system called Google Meets. Lo hacemos por un sistema que se llama Google Meets electrónicamente.
So it's supposed to be under the law that the trial has to happen within 20 days of when they ask for it. Supuestamente la audiencia, el juicio tiene que llevarse a cabo 20 días de cuando lo piden. But the courts are very, very backed up, and that is just not being enforced. Las cortes están muy estancadas y eso no se está enforzando. Again, it's taking, I don't know, I would say we should probably figure it out again, but there was a point at which it was taking 6 months to get a court date, an actual trial. 6 meses, la última vez que vi, para actualmente, un promedio de 6 meses para actualmente irse a un juicio. But there are sometimes surprises. A veces hay sorpresas. This week, we lost a motion for summary judgment. Esta semana perdimos una petición para que un juzgamento se dé inmediatamente sin ir a juicio. Basic motion for summary judgment is the other side saying, the facts are agreed. Los datos estamos de acuerdo. We just need a judge to tell us what the law is on this point. Necesitamos un juez que nos diga cuál es la ley sobre este punto. And I'll use this as an example. In this case, the tenant in November of 2020 paid the rent. En noviembre del 2020 pagaron sus rentas. And the landlord rejected it. It was a new landlord. El dueño la rechazó. Era un nuevo dueño. And the tenant went to talk to an agency, and the agency told them, well, if they don't want your money, you don't have to give it to them, but buy a money order every month. La agencia les aconsejó, or they misunderstood, because that's not very good advice. No tienen que pagar si no quieren recibir, compren un giro cada mes, y traten, excuse my dog, but we're just going to let him bark his little heart out until he calms down. No, básicamente les dijeron que no tenían que pagar con que compraran los giros. The owner then waited all the way until June and to serve a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit. Esperaron hasta junio para dar una nota de 3 días para pagar la renta o salirse. And in June of 2020, 3-day notices were still the way to go. In junio, oh, maybe not. Maybe it was a 15-day notice. I don't really actually remember. But the tenant, by then we were in the middle of the pandemic, the tenant denied access for the repairs. El inquilino negó acceso para que se hicieran las reparaciones. And the judge found that that denial of access means he wasn't entitled to a eviction protection, que el hecho de que había negado el acceso quiere decir que no tiene el derecho a defender el caso de desalojo. And I would say that normally that would be true. We have to be very careful with the denial of access. Tenemos que tener mucho cuidado sobre negar acceso, especially if you're not paying your rent and raising breach of warranty of habitability as your defense. Especialmente si no están pagando la renta y la defensa es que hay malas condiciones. Necesitan dar acceso aunque estemos en medio de una pandemia. You have to give access even though we're in the middle of a pandemic. You just have to do it safely. Lo tienen que hacer en una manera segura. Our argument was the repairs he was complaining about were for November. Las reparaciones eran desde noviembre. Así es, so the denial of access in June has nothing to do with anything. El hecho de que negó acceso en junio no tiene nada que ver con nada. But the judge disagreed with us, and now we need to figure out what to do about that. El juez se puso en desacuerdo con nosotros. Tenemos que descifrar qué hacer. And that came as a surprise to us and to the tenant. Eso fue una sorpresa para nosotros y el inquilino. So there's a certain amount of unpredictability in this. Hay ciertas cosas que no podemos predecir. I'll give you another example. There's someone on this call who's being evicted on a 60-day notice to quit, no cause. Hay alguien en esta llamada que la están desalojando con una nota de 60 días para salirse sin causa. That person's protected by the county emergency protections, protección de las protecciones del condado. This entire time, everybody has thought that the county protections are in place and they survive anything the governor did, and except for the protections having to do with payment of rent. Uh, it's a complicated issue about what happens when there's different levels of loss. But everyone thought that the 60-day notice, you cannot evict someone in LA County um, for a no cause notice during the pandemic, that is a sacred protection. Todos pensamos que durante la pandemia, si alguien vive en el condado de Los Ángeles, no pueden desalojarlos con una nota de 60 días durante la pandemia. A judge in Lancaster has ruled that that provision of the LA County law is preempted by the state law. Un juez en Lancaster ha decidido que esa provisión de la ley del condado está está sobresaltada por las leyes estatales. That doesn't apply in Pasadena or in Los Angeles. En las ciudades de Los Ángeles y Pasadena no aplica because of the way the Pasadena and Los Angeles laws were passed and worded, por la manera en que esas leyes se pasaron y fueron. But the point of the story is, here we are, we're telling this woman you can't be evicted. So this is a game changer for that family. Eso de repente está cambiando la situación para esta familia. So there's a lot of unpredictability in this process. Muchas cosas que no podemos predecir, okay? Generally, however, we end up either settling, there's negotiation throughout the process. Llegamos a un acuerdo, hay negociación en todo el proceso. We even have gotten good settlements after losing because landlords don't want us to appeal. Hasta después de perder se puede llegar a un acuerdo porque el dueño no quiere que archivemos una apelación. But normally there's a judgment and either the tenant wins, se gana, or the tenant loses and the sheriff comes, generally 14 to 21 days. O perdemos y el sheriff viene, normalmente 14 a 21 días. Although again, there are ways that we can extend that, and that also can be unpredictable. Hay maneras que podemos extender eso, la cantidad de tiempo, y también es impredecible. So the message that you should be getting from this particular part of the presentation, el mensaje que deben de estar recibiendo de esta parte de la presentación is, the process is unpredictable. El proceso es impredecible. We have success 98% of the time. Tenemos éxito 98% de los casos. That is not a guarantee. No es una garantía. Success means either winning and you stay. Éxito quiere decir ganamos y se quedan. Or we reach an agreement that is favorable to you. O llegamos a un acuerdo que es favorable para el inquilino. But again, the process is unpredictable. El proceso es impredecible. When you come to us, we're going to ask you to decide on a route. Cuando vienen con nosotros, vamos a pedirles que escojan una ruta. To the left is, I am fighting for my unit, I am fighting to stay. A la izquierda es, estoy luchando por mi unidad, estoy luchando para quedarme. We want people to fight to stay. Queremos que luchen para quedarse. Because we don't have real rent control anywhere in the state of California, porque no tenemos control de renta en el estado de California, every time a tenant moves out, cada vez que se sale un inquilino, the price of that unit goes up, el precio de esa unidad sube to whatever the landlord gets somebody else to pay, a lo que el dueño puede convencer al próximo inquilino que pague. And that's why we're in the middle of a housing crisis. Y por eso estamos en medio de una crisis de vivienda. Starting in May of 2016, empezando en mayo del 2016, rent started skyrocketing without explanation. Hugo, por favor, póngase en mudo. Hugo, que acaba de entrar, póngase en mudo. Hugo, please put yourself on mute. And so those rents started going up, and people ask me, I always get media calls, why do you think that rents have gone up so dramatically? ¿Por qué piensa que han subido? Hugo, por favor, póngase en mudo. Can you stop the recording for a second? So the housing crisis, media reporters always asking me, why do you think prices go up? And the real answer is because they can, because there's no restrictions. ¿Por qué suben los rentos de los precios de las rentas? Porque no hay restricciones. What we need is rent control laws that have vacancy control. Necesitamos leyes de control de renta que tienen control sobre los vacantes, so that when a tenant moves out, the next tenant pays exactly the same thing as the previous tenant. Si sale un inquilino, no importa la razón, el próximo inquilino paga exactamente lo que está pagando el presente inquilino. That would stop harassment and evictions, probably 99% of harassment and evictions. Eso probablemente para 99% del hostigamiento y desalojos, because the landlord has no economic incentive for kicking you out. No hay ningún incentivo económico para echarlos. Okay? So we want people to fight to stay. It's not always possible, no es siempre posible, but it is our favorite route. Es la ruta favorita para nosotros. You also can choose the route of going, of moving. Pueden escoger la ruta de salirse. If you choose the route of moving, you have to decide, how much time do I need? What is my plan? Where am I going? Okay. ¿Cuál es mi plan? ¿Cuánto tiempo necesita? ¿Dónde me voy? The first thing, whenever my clients tell me I want to move, I want to be out in 3 months. Where are you going? What's the plan? ¿A dónde se van? ¿Cuál es el plan? And it's got to be a good plan. Tiene que ser un plan razonable. Okay. I have a client who is desperate to get out because of the harassment, and he kept telling me he wanted out, but he can't afford to move. No puede salirse. Tengo un cliente que está desesperado del hostigamiento y quiero salirme, quiero que me consigas un par de meses más y me salgo. Pero ¿dónde te vas a ir? One day he says, I'm going to pitch a tent in the park down the street. Voy a comprar una tienda y ponerlo en el parque que está cerca de la casa. That's not a plan, people. Eso no es un plan. So we're still kind of trying to figure out what's going to happen in that situation. Todavía estamos tratando de descifrar qué va a pasar en esa situación. So, what's your plan? How many months do you need? And we ask for the rent to be forgiven. Nosotros pedimos que la renta se disculpe and get that 98% of the time, y lo logramos 98% del tiempo. And we sometimes also ask for extra money, y también pedimos dinero extra, and for your record to stay clean, y que su récord se mantenga limpio. When an eviction is filed, it is sealed. Nobody can see it except the parties and their attorneys. Cuando se archiva un desalojo, está sellada. Nadie lo puede ver, con la excepción de los dos abogados y las dos partes. So, what part of our absolute requirements to settle a case is for that seal to stay in place. Uno de los requisitos para llegar a un acuerdo es que ese sello se mantenga en lugar, so that you'll be able to rent someplace else, para poder rentar en otro lugar. So, how much time do you need? ¿Cuánto tiempo necesitan? Making a very clear plan that is reasonable, hacer un plan que es razonable. Number 2 is forgiven rent, renta disculpada. Number 3 is some extra money, un dinerito extra, si es posible. And number 4 is record clean, record limpio. Those are the elements of a move-out agreement. People ask me, well, how much time do you think is fair? ¿Cuánto tiempo piensa que es justo? Frankly, this one isn't about fairness. It's about how much time do you need. En realidad es cuánto tiempo necesitan. Now, once you decide, ya que deciden, we have to make sure that your position is reasonable. Necesitamos ver si su posición es razonable. So, for instance, if you are someone who never paid rent in the place, so you are a tenant at will, son alguien que nunca han pagado renta, se consideran inquilinos at will. So usually this is the family home, You lived there, the parents have died, the sister's the executor of the estate, and the sister wants to kick you out. They can do that. You are a tenant at will. Los casos como esos son, por ejemplo, nunca han pagado renta porque es una situación familiar y de repente quiere el dueño, o sea, murieron los padres, la hermana es la que está manejando el estate y quieren que te salga, o a veces los padres se hartan, quieren que te salgas, esa persona no tiene mucho derecho. Pre-pandemic, that person could get evicted on a 30-day notice, no cause. Pre-pandemia, esa persona puede ser desalojada en una nota de 30 días sin causa. During the pandemic, we are arguing that those tenancies are protected by the emergency protections, but some judges agree with us and some don't. Durante la pandemia estamos argumentando que las protecciones de emergencia protegen esos inquilinatos. Algunos jueces están de acuerdo con nosotros, algunos no. So, for the most part, we settle those cases. Mayor parte del tiempo llegamos a un acuerdo. So even if you want to be on that route, we're going to probably get on a little four-wheel drive and take you over here and make a plan and get you out of there. Probablemente en esa situación vamos a hacer un plan para que se salgan. Another example of someone who probably should be on that route, on this road, is someone who does not have a strong local rent stabilization protection, is protected by the state rent stabilization law, but the landlord is saying that they're going to do substantial renovation. Situaciones donde el dueño está diciendo que van a hacer remodelaciones sustanciales y la única protección que tiene el inquilino es la ley estatal. Well, they're going to be able to do that after the pandemic. Lo van a poder echar después de la pandemia. So sometimes in those cases, we're thinking ahead and moving to the move out rent. En alguno de esos casos estamos pensando en adelante y moviéndonos a esta ruta. There's someone on the call who is a former resident manager. Hay alguien en la llamada que es una manejadora, and the new owners came in and they asked them to leave. Nuevos dueños les pidieron que se muevan. Often new owners buy, they want their own people managing their building. Dueños compran, quieren sus propia gente manejando un edificio. There's no defenses to that. No hay defenses a ese caso. We are arguing that the emergency measures defend, protect. Estamos argumentando que las medidas de emergencia sí protegen. Some judges agree with us and some don't. Algunos jueces están de acuerdo con nosotros, algunos no. That's a case that needs to be on this move out road with a reasonable plan. Ese es un caso que tiene que estar en esta ruta de mudarse con un plan razonable. During the pandemic, it's been very hard to develop these move out plans. Durante la pandemia ha sido súper difícil desarrollar estos planes de mudarse. Why? Because people don't have money. La gente no tiene dinero. They've lost their jobs. Han perdido su trabajo. Dueños are looking for people with long-term steady income that's at least 2 or 3 times more than the rent. Los dueños están buscando a inquilinos que tienen trabajo estable, no tuvieron problemas durante la pandemia y tienen 2 a 3 veces el nivel de la renta para poder pagar. And so the people that are coming to these workshops, that's not you, right? Well, you're here because you're having problems during the pandemic. Las personas que están viniendo a estos talleres han tenido problemas durante la pandemia, así es que es difícil encontrar. So we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place. Estamos entre la espada y la pared because we can't win. No podemos ganar en algunos de esos casos. Or we can win this case, but there's going to be another case that we can't win. Podemos ganar este caso, pero el próximo no. And the tenant doesn't have any way to make a plan to move out. Y el inquilino no tiene manera de desarrollar un plan para salirse. And I know there's several of you, some people I've talked to that are in that rock and a hard place situation, que están ahí entre la espada y la pared. What I'm going to say to you is, and before we end, I'm going to give Jaylyn another opportunity to do her pep talk because she does it better than I do. les voy a decir es que being stressed out is not helpful. Que hacer decisiones de una posición de donde tienen miedo o estrés no ayuda. So you have to keep coming to these workshops because over time it will teach you to be less afraid of the process and more empowered and less stressed out. Tienen que regresar a estos talleres porque sobre el tiempo van a aprender a tener menos miedo. La información quita el miedo y menos estrés y hacer mejores decisiones. Stressed out clients make very bad decisions. Las personas que operan por miedo o estrés, malas decisiones. Um, you also have to listen to your lawyer. Tienen que hacerle caso a su abogado. It's not that we're always right. Like I've been proven wrong twice in the last 2 months. Two cases that I thought there were no way we could win, and we won. En los últimos cuantos meses tuvimos dos casos que yo pensaba no había manera de ganarlo y los ganamos. But we're usually right, pero normalmente sí tenemos razón. And ultimately the decision is yours. Al fin de cuentas, la decisión es de ustedes. But I think it is important to listen to the years of experience. Es importante escuchar y hacerle caso a los años de experiencia. And I'm going to tell you that story because I think what is different about the Saturday workshop is that I tell different stories every time. Lo que es diferente de los talleres de los sábados es que doy diferentes ejemplos cada vez. And people can learn from those examples. La gente puede aprender de esos ejemplos. So there's this tenant who's being harassed by his neighbor in a very horrible way. Inquilino, hostigamiento por medio del vecino de abajo, in the downstairs apartment, upstairs apartment. Racist, racismo, palabras muy fuertes, very, very strong racist words for a long time, por mucho tiempo. And one day the guy's coming home from grocery shopping. The neighbor downstairs calls him racist stuff and starts yelling at him. And he calmly walks upstairs, puts his groceries away, picks up a baseball bat, and comes back down. Con muy calmadamente, llega con sus bolsas de su marqueta. El inquilino lo está insultando muy fuertemente y mucho racismo. Sube, guarda pone su mandado adentro y recoge un bate de béisbol y baja. Fortunately, he didn't hit anyone with it. Afortunadamente no le pegó a nadie. But when the neighbors started getting aggressive with him, he swung it to defend himself. Sí no asaltó, pero sí lo usó y lo puso en el aire para defenderse. And he was being evicted for nuisance. Y lo estaban desalojando por molestia grave. Frankly, I don't see how that's not a nuisance to this day. Hasta el momento no sé cómo ganamos. But we have a young lawyer named Natalie Medina on our crew who has a very particular style, and she persuaded the jury that, yeah, if he had hit someone, it wouldn't have been self-defense. Si le había pegado a alguien, no hubiera sido autodefensa, because he put himself in the dangerous situation by leaving the safety of his home with a baseball bat to confront his neighbor, porque él se salió de su casa con el bate para confrontar su vecino. Así es que no hubiera sido autodefensa si lo hubiera pegado. But he never hit anyone. Nunca le pegó a nadie. And then Natalie convinced the jury that because of that, it wasn't a nuisance. Natalie convenció al jurado que a raíces de eso no era una molestia grave. And I think that technically, legally, that is correct. Técnicamente, legalmente, eso es correcto. But I am surprised that she found enough jurors to agree with her. Sorprendida que encontró suficientes miembros del jurado que se pusieron de acuerdo de ustedes. And, directing myself primarily to the men, although I have seen women do things they shouldn't do, dirigiéndome principalmente a los hombres, aunque así he visto mujeres que han hecho cosas como estas. On television, you see people beating each other up and doing all kinds of stuff without consequence. Ven a gente que se andan golpeando sin consecuencia. In reality, if you even just threaten to hit someone, you can end up in jail. La amenaza a golpear a alguien puede ocasionar un viajito a la cárcel. So don't lower yourself to whatever is happening When someone is attacking you, you should turn the other cheek and walk away. Cuando alguien los ataque, deben de darle ¿cómo se dice? Turn the other cheek. No, deben de defenderse al alejarse de la situación. Uh, what happens in television is not what generally happens in real life. Lo que pasa en televisión no es lo que pasa. We had a case at the beginning of the pandemic where a frustrated tenant who'd been harassed by her landlord repeatedly um, threw a glass of water at the landlord through a screen door, but a little bit of water landed on him and she was almost arrested for assault. Now, that seems a little exaggerated, but it was at the beginning of the pandemic and when we're trying to social distance, etc., and the police um, considered assault with a deadly weapon. Am, Al principio de la pandemia tuvimos un caso de una mujer frustrada por tanto hostigamiento por medio de su dueño, le echó un vaso de agua por medio de un screen. Así es que, pero sí salpicó algo, el agua al dueño al otro lado del screen door. Y la policía casi la arrestaron por asalto con una arma porque la agua podría contener bacteria de COVID. Así es que tengan cuidado cómo se comportan. Be very careful about how you handle yourself, lest you find yourself in a case that we can't win, porque se pueden encontrar en un caso que no podemos ganar, in which case we have to choose this move out road. Tenemos que escoger la ruta de salirse. Okay? So, in deciding what to do with your case and what route you should be on, en decidir qué hacer con su caso y qué ruta deben de estar, we look at 16 factors. Vemos a 16 factores. And I can calculate it very quickly. Yo lo puedo calcular muy rápidamente for my young lawyers who are here because they want to hear the 16 factors again. This is the place to pay really close attention. Para mis nuevos abogados que están aquí porque quieren oír los 16 factores, aquí estamos. The first thing we look at is the value of the unit. How much is your rent? For how much space? And where is it? El valor de la unidad. ¿Cuánto es su renta? ¿Cuánto espacio tienen? ¿Y a dónde está localizada? Is your unit below market? ¿Está bajo del precio del mercado la unidad? The second thing we look at is there a law that protects the unit? ¿Hay una ley que protege la unidad? We call those laws usually rent control laws. Les decimos a esas leyes de control de renta. There are, I think, 8 cities in the county of Los Angeles with these laws. Hay 8 ciudades en el condado de Los Ángeles con estas leyes. The unincorporated LA County has such a law. Las áreas no incorporadas del condado tienen una de esas leyes. And then we have the statewide law. Tenemos una ley a nivel estatal. But not every unit is covered. No están cubiertas todas las unidades. So each law has its own requirements. Cada ley tiene sus requisitos. We have to figure out if your unit is protected. Tenemos que descifrar si está protegida la unidad que ustedes ocupan. And we also have to recognize that they're not rent control laws. They're really rent stabilization laws because if the landlord succeeds in evicting you, they'll be able to charge the next tenant whatever they want. Son leyes de estabilización de renta, no de control de renta, porque si tiene éxito el dueño en echarlos, va a poder cobrar lo que quiera al próximo inquilino, el dueño. Other ways to have protection for a unit is government subsidy. Otras maneras de tener protección para unidad es un subsidio del gobierno. And by that I mean Section 8 or some other money that the landlord received in order to house people that are lower income. Un dinero que recibió el dueño para dar vivienda a personas de bajos ingresos. Those subsidies usually come with eviction protection. Normalmente vienen con alguna protección contra el desalojo. And then you might also have an unexpired lease. Quizás tengan un acuerdo de arrendamiento que no se ha vencido. Normally, leases in residential tenancies are 6 months, sometimes a year. Normalmente si hay un acuerdo es para 6 meses o para un año. But I have seen multiple year leases. He visto acuerdos por múltiples años. And whether or not, even if you are now on a month to month, aunque estén de mes a mes, we need to know what that lease, what that rental agreement says, because every time you pay the rent, you renew it for another month. Entonces necesitamos ver ese acuerdo, saber qué es lo que dice, porque cada vez que pagan la renta, se renueve por otro mes. Okay. So, having determined these, value of the unit and if it's protected, habiendo determinado el valor de la unidad y si está protegida, we need to decide if we can win. Tenemos que decidir, podemos ganar. Is there a law that protects you against this eviction? ¿Hay una ley que los protege contra este desalojo? Are there defenses? ¿Hay defensas contra este desalojo? And then, can we prove those defenses? Podemos comprobar esas defensas. Aquí tengo un caso ahorita that if I can prove the defenses, no problem, we win. Tenant lives in a rent-controlled unit and is being evicted on a no-cause notice. That can't be done. Vive en una protegida, I'm sorry, I said rent-controlled, protected by the Los Angeles Rent Stabilization Ordinance. We use rent control as a shortcut, but it's laziness. It's really rent stabilization. Una unidad protegida por la Ley de Estabilización de Renta de Los Ángeles. Y es una nota de 30 días, and he's been there for many, many years. So at least 60 would be required. Ha estado muchos años, tiene el derecho a 60. And he's entitled to a reason under the law for the eviction. Y tiene el derecho a una razón bajo la ley para el desalojo. Dead man winner. Ganar. 100%. Bueno, 99.9. There's never any guarantees on winning. 99% que se puede ganar. Except that he's been paying rent in cash all these years. Ha estado pagando en efectivo todos esos años because the owner was his friend. El dueño era su amigo. So now the kids, the son, I think, or the wife are trying to evict him after the owner passed. And so if we cannot, if the jury does not believe that he's been paying in cash, he's a tenant at will. Si el jurado no cree que está pagado en efectivo, entonces es un tenant at will. And again, we probably can win this during the pandemic, but eventually we wouldn't be able to. Durante la pandemia sí se prohíbe, creo, mi opinión, ese tipo de desalojo. Pero, ¿qué hacemos después de la pandemia? So in that case, we have laws that protect him, credible witness, él es un buen testigo, but no evidence of the rent payments, no hay evidencia de los pagos de renta, and so we have to keep that in mind. So, do we have the evidence to prove it? And are our witnesses going to be good? ¿Nuestros testigos van a ser buenos? Including how likable is our client, incluso qué tan de agradable es nuestro cliente. And I hate to tell you this, but I think that's one of the most important factors if the jury likes you. Uno de los factores más importantes es si el jurado, si ustedes les caen bien al jurado. And I often get into little tiffs with my clients because from the moment you start speaking to me, I insist that you speak in sort of this very soft, level tone. Insisto que hablen en este tono muy nivelado, muy medio dulce, ¿no? It is more natural for tenants who are facing eviction to be angry and to use this kind of tone. And so they're telling me the story and they're telling it to me like this. And then the landlord did that. And then the landlord did the other. And you see how unlikable that is. Y pueden ver que todo no agradable es. Hard for the person that is trying to help you to spend all day long listening to angry people. Es difícil pasar todo el día escuchando a personas que andan estresadas y enojadas. But it's also hard for anyone to hear you when you're talking in that tone. Es difícil que alguien los escuche cuando están hablando en ese tono. And it takes practice to talk in this tone. This is also not my normal tone. This is a very rehearsed tone. Eso no es mi tono normal tampoco. Eso es algo que tengo que practicar. And you have to start practicing telling your story in this tone now. Tienen que empezar a practicar contar su historial en este tono ahorita, so that you will be likable to the jury, para que sean agradables al jurado. When people aren't angry, they're whiny, and I have a hard time doing the whiny voice, but it's like this, oh yeah, and then yeah, and then yeah, and they did it again, and yeah. Also not likable, también no agradable. And so when I'm talking to you, I will tell you, watch your tone. Cuando estoy hablando con ustedes, los interrumpo y les digo, aguas con su tono. And I need you then shift to this. And I don't want to hear, but I'm upset, but it's hard. I don't want to hear any of that. I don't want to hear I'm trying either. No quiero oír, estoy tratando de hacerlo bien. I need you to do it. We all heard what Yoda told Luke Skywalker when he wasn't getting the moves right. And Luke Skywalker told him, I'm trying. And Yoda said, do or do not. There is no try. En la película de Star Wars, cuando Luke no está haciendo las movidas bien, y le dice a su profesor, estoy haciendo lo mejor que pueda, le dice, no hagas el intento, hazlo, ¿ok? Because the dog ate my homework does not work in the eviction process. El perro se comió mi tarea no funciona en el proceso de desalojo. You have to have the evidence, you have to be together, you have to be likable, or you will not have a good result. Necesitan traer la evidencia, necesitan tener un comportamiento agradable o no van a ganar. Okay? The next factor is other leverage. El próximo factor es otras palancas. We propound discovery because we need the information. Hacemos ese proceso de descubrimiento porque necesitamos la información. But if I have a client who just needs a couple more months because they have a job in Utah and they can get out of here in 4 months, si tengo un cliente que se puede salir en 4 meses porque ya tienen un trabajo en Utah, pero necesitan 4 meses, we can serve discovery with a jury demand and an offer that you'll be out in 4 months as long as you're 100% sure, and use that leverage to reach an agreement. Podemos mandar con una oferta, con todo el trabajo que va a tener que hacer el abogado del dueño. And we can try to reach a settlement early. Podemos tratar de lograr un acuerdo temprano. The landlord has to think, oh my God, I got to pay my lawyer to prepare for a jury trial and do all this discovery. Maybe that's going to be more expensive than just giving the tenant the time they need. Tener que pagar a mi abogado a hacer todo este trabajo es menos conveniente económicamente que simple y sencillamente darle al inquilino el tiempo que necesita. But we have to have, in order for that to work, para que funcione eso, we also have to have the ability to win. Necesitamos la habilidad de ganar. We have to have a case that has defenses. Tenemos que tener un caso que tiene defensas. Otherwise, we're stuck accepting less. Si no, tenemos que aceptar menos tiempo, menos beneficios. Another leverage is the unlimited attorney's fees provision in the lease. Otra palanca puede ser si hay una cláusula en su acuerdo que dice que el que gana, que el que pierde va a tener que pagar las cuotas de abogado al que gana. An unlimited attorney's fees provision says that the person who loses the case is going to have to pay all the attorney's fees of the person who wins. So that's a double-edged sword, right? Because you could get stuck paying all of their attorney's fees. Eso es una espada de doble filo, porque ustedes si pierden van a tener que pagar las cuotas de abogado de los dueños. But it's a double-edged sword where the blade is sharper on our side. El filo está más agudo en nuestro lado because it's easier for us to collect from them than them to collect from you. Porque es más fácil nosotros colectar de ellos que ellos colectar de nosotros. So we had a case just a little while ago that settled, at the last minute, and the deciding factor for that lawyer was the fear that if he lost, his client would have to pay our attorney's fees. So then we consider the client's finances. Consideramos las finanzas del inquilino. And by that we mean, how collectible are they? If there's a judgment against you, are they going to be able to collect it? Si hay un juzgamiento contra ustedes, ¿lo van a poder colectar? If you're on government benefits, SSI, AFDC, actually it's not called that anymore, it's called CalFresh now, I think. If you're on government benefits, si están en beneficios de gobierno, they can't collect that. No se los pueden quitar. So we're more likely to get an agreement with complete waiver of rent. Más probable que no les cobren la renta. Plus, if we lose and they can't collect it anyways, then you're risking less. Si perdemos y no pueden colectar la renta de todos modos, están arriesgando menos. The same thing if you're paid under the table, si los pagan baja la mesa, and especially if you don't have a social security number. Y especialmente si no tienen un número de seguro social, and if you have a common name, y si tienen un nombre común. If all of those factors, so if there's a judgment against you, how's anyone even going to know it was you if there's no social security number or common name? ¿Cómo van a saberlos, cómo colectarlos si no hay un trabajo donde pueden ir? No hay número de seguro social. So we can take more chances in those cases. Podemos tomar más chances en esos casos. So, what's the value of the unit? ¿Cuál es el valor de la unidad? Is it protected by some law? ¿Está protegida por alguna ley? Can we win? ¿Podemos ganar? ¿Tenemos otras palancas? Is there other leverage? What are the client's finances? How collectible is the client? ¿Qué tal de posibilidad va a haber que van a poder colectar del cliente lo que debe? And then, what are we risking? What's on the table? ¿Qué estamos arriesgando? ¿Qué está en la mesa? A negotiation is a combination of playing poker, chicken, and let's make a deal. Poker, if you're not a good poker player, you're not a good negotiator. Si no pueden jugar poker bien, no son buenos negociantes. Chicken is the game where the two cars go and see who chickens out first. Van dos carros en el juego de chicken y a ver quién se desvía primero. So that has to do with how much courage you have, qué tanto de valor tiene. It also has to do with how stupid you are. También tiene que ver qué tan de tontos son. Because the guy who doesn't veer off, yeah, maybe it's courage, but maybe it's also sheer stupidity. Both of you are going to crash and die if somebody doesn't veer off. Ambos van a morir si alguien no se desvía. And let's make a deal. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. El juego Let's Make a Deal en Domingo Gigante o Sábado Gigante es un juego donde aquí te tengo un premio. ¿Quieres aceptar este premio? O detrás de una puerta algo mejor, pero quizás en la otra puerta algo peor. So in Let's Make a Deal, you have a prize, and then you have to either accept that prize or maybe get something better behind one door or something worse behind another door. Are you going to take a chance? Van a tomar un chance. So if what's on the table right now is enough, maybe not enough time to move, not enough waived rent, but all of a sudden, and you're giving up a below market rate unit, se están saliendo de una unidad muy barata y les ofrecen tiempo y dinero. But all of a sudden they offer you $75,000. De repente les ofrecen $75,000. Usually that happens in steps, right? We'll give you 10,000. We'll give you 20,000. We'll give you 30,000. When it starts going in close to 100,000, you got to think. Cuando ya están acercándose a $100,000, hay que pensar. If I lose, I'm walking away with nothing. Si pierdo, me salgo aquí sin nada. What's on the table? ¿Qué está en la mesa? Not too long ago, we had a case that I thought was a relatively strong case. Tuvimos un caso que yo pensaba que era relativamente fuerte. And they weren't offering very much. Y no estaban ofreciendo mucho. And so we were fighting. Y andábamos luchando. But then the judge took the issue away from the jury, in my opinion, inappropriately. Le quitó la decisión al jurado, en mi opinión, no apropiadamente. I think we would have had a good appeal. Tendríamos una buena apelación. Um, and the tenant was forced to decide very quickly, forzando al inquilino a decidir muy rápidamente, between accepting a deal that wasn't really great, aceptando un acuerdo no tan bueno, or likely losing and taking the case up on appeal. Perder y apelar. And she took the deal y aceptó el acuerdo. Because we were risking something, and once we heard the judge's opinion of the case, likely going to lose. Ahora estamos arriesgando algo, tiempo, renta disculpada y dinero. We were risking time to move, forgiven rent, and some money, not enough, but some money. And the indication from the judge was that we were going to lose the case. La indicación del juez era que íbamos a perder el caso. And so she took the deal because she was risking something that wasn't worth risking, porque estaba arriesgando algo, no le valía la pena arriesgar y perder. The next factor is the players. ¿Quiénes son los jugadores aquí? Who's our opponent? Are they a good trial attorney? Nuestro oponente es un buen abogado para en un juicio. Who's the landlord? ¿Quién es el dueño? Do they have the money to fight us? ¿Tienen el dinero para hacer este proceso a largo plazo? Are they the kind of landlord that will give in at the last minute? Nuestra historia con ellos es que se rinden al último momento. Or are they the kind of landlord that what they say at the beginning of the negotiation, that's what it's going to be? O el tipo de que lo que dicen al principio es así va a ser. We need to know who are judges. Necesitamos saber quién es nuestro juez. In the downtown court, we know from the beginning. En la corte de downtown sabemos desde el principio, and we're fine with all 4 judges downtown. Y estamos bien con los 4 jueces. That doesn't apply. There's some people on here who, so in the downtown court, most evictions are held in 4 departments. En la corte de downtown, la mayor parte de los desalojos se escuchan en 4 departamentos. But if the amount of money that you owe is more than $25,000, you get sent to another judge, to many judges. Si deben más de $25,000, otros jueces pueden ser. But we know those judges from the beginning. Sabemos esos jueces desde el principio. In the other courts, en las cortes alrededor, including Pasadena, West Covina, and Compton, incluso Compton, Pasadena y West Covina, donde nosotros representamos, we don't stay with the original judge that we are assigned. No nos quedamos con el juez original, because when you demand a jury, they send you someplace else. Cuando piden un jurado, los mandan a otra corte. So we won't know your judge until we're actually sent out. No vamos a saber el juez antes de que nos manden al juez. Where we're sent also determines the quality of our jurors. Donde nos mandan también determina la calidad de nuestros miembros del jurado. So we do jury trials because we believe that we are more likely to get tenants deciding your case, a jury of your peers, than people who probably come from money. And if they were ever a tenant, it was when mommy and daddy were paying the rent when they were in college. Es mejor tener gente común y corriente como nosotros, decidiendo nuestro caso, que tener una persona. Los jueces tienen la tendencia de venir de dinero, de familias de dinero, y probablemente no pueden de veras entender la situación del inquilino, porque si fueron inquilinos fue cuando estaban en la universidad y mamá y papá pagaban la renta. Así es que no pueden entender lo que le pasa al inquilino. Another player that's important is your lawyer. How confident is your lawyer? How knowledgeable is your lawyer? ¿Cuánta confianza tiene su abogado? How much experience does your lawyer have? ¿Cuánta experiencia tiene? Y cuál es su capacidad del abogado del inquilino? And you, y usted, el cliente, the client. This is why these workshops are so important, and I'll repeat it again. Por eso esos talleres son tan importantes. In my experience, tenants that come to the workshops and get involved in tenant rights organizations, en mi experiencia, los inquilinos que vienen a estos talleres y se involucran en organizaciones de inquilinos are better clients, son mejores clientes. They don't get nervous, no se ponen nerviosos. They are better prepared to make decisions, mejor preparados para hacer decisiones. They don't make decisions out of fear. No hacen sus decisiones basado en el miedo. And then we always return to, can we win? Siempre regresamos a, podemos ganar. So now comes the test. Ahora viene la prueba. Let's suppose that I have a client, it's a non-payment of rent case, and the best offer I have from the other side is that my client will leave in 3 weeks, que mi cliente se salga en 3 semanas, pay all the rent, paguen toda la renta, no money to help them move, sin dinero para salirse, but they will keep their record sealed, pero mantienen su récord sellado. I want to know whether you think that's a good deal. Quiero saber si piensan que es un buen acuerdo eso. Anybody? Is that a good deal?
I think that's a terrible deal.
Okay, you think it's a terrible deal. So you're going to be surprised when I tell you that I made that deal once. Hice ese trato. Así es que ella piensa que es un horrible acuerdo, pero una vez lo hice. Why? The value of the unit was in the $5,000 range. Okay, so it wasn't a below market rate tenancy. La unidad, la renta era como $5,000, a luxury unit in Marina del Rey. Una unidad de lujo en Marina del Rey. It was unprotected by any law. No tenía ninguna protección de cualquier ley. There was no way to win. No había manera de ganar. The tenant didn't pay the rent because he lost his job, went through his savings, and went through his savings, and that this was it. There were absolutely no defenses, not even a broken light socket, ni siquiera una luz, un foco no funcionando. No problems with the unit, no defenses. We didn't have a lot of leverage because I didn't do discovery for him because I didn't want to beef up the fees, and because there was nothing to discover. No había nada para descubrir y no quería aumentar las rentas because that unlimited attorney's fees provision that blade was sharper on their side in this case. El filo había una provisión sin límites de abogado, así es que had we done all of this, it would have actually ended up costing the tenant more. Hubiera costado más al inquilino. He had lost his job and now he had a new one, and he was a mortgage broker financial consultant. Ya tenía un nuevo trabajo y él era mortgage broker, consultor de finanzas. So, a eviction, so he was collectible, podían colectar, he had money, tenía dinero, and if he had an eviction on his record, he would lose his new job. Con un desalojo en su record, iba a perder su nuevo empleo. Sylvia, who just came in,
Yes.
please mute yourself. Por favor, póngase en mudo. So for him, the most important thing was the sealed record. Para él, la cosa más importante era el récord sellado. They were not offering anything. That was their best offer. Mejor oferta. If I had taken it to trial, the result would have been 3 weeks to move, owing all the rent, owing the other side's attorney's fees, and an unsealed record. Yendo a juicio, el resultado hubiera sido 3 semanas para salirse, because it takes 14 to 21 days, porque 3 weeks to move because it takes 14 to 21 days, 3 semanas para salirse porque se dilata el proceso después de perder 14 a 21 días. Owing all the rent, debiendo todo el renta, plus attorney's fees, más las cuotas de abogado, y un récord abierto. And in this case, the players didn't really much matter, right? Because a complete putz of a lawyer on the other side could have beaten me on it, porque un abogado súper no experto podía vencerme en este caso, because I had no defenses, no tenía defensas. And the client was very likable, actually. El cliente era muy agradable. But no matter how likable you are, if you didn't pay your $5,000 a month rent and you have no defenses, you're going to lose. No importa qué tan de agradable eres, si no pagaste tu renta de $5,000 al mes, vas a perder. So we could not win. No podíamos ganar. So that was the best deal possible in this case because the sealed record was the most important thing. Eso era la mejor oferta que podíamos encontrar en ese caso. It's an extreme example. I've had to do that maybe 5 times in my career. Es un ejemplo extremo y quizás 15 arreglos como esos en mi carrera. Out of thousands and thousands. You know, Eden represents close to 1,000 people a year. Eden representa más o menos 1,000 personas al año. And I've been doing this since 1985. Y he estado haciendo esto desde el 85. So out of thousands and thousands, that's been the result, maybe 5 times. How about this one? ¿Qué tal este? 6 months to move, 6 meses para salirse. Forgiven rent, renta disculpada. $33,000 of forgiven rent, $33,000 de renta disculpada. Sealed record, record sellado, and $100,000 on top of that to move, y $100,000 para mudarse. Is that a good agreement?
I think that's an exquisite agreement.
Yeah. Most people would think it's an exquisite agreement. La mayor parte de la gente va a pensar que es algo exquisito. Muy buen acuerdo. Let's look at the factors in that one. Value of the unit, it was like a $600-700 a month rent-controlled unit in Venice. $600-700 al mes, unidad controlada por control de renta en Venice. So, definitely a unit worth protecting. Definitivamente una unidad que valía la pena proteger. Can we win on this one? 99.9% chance of winning that case because they'd made a mistake. And so we were going to win that case. Íbamos a ganar ese caso porque habían cometido un error. They were demolishing. I can't remember if they were demolishing 4 to build 6 or demolishing 6 to build 4. Luxury condos. Condominios de lujo. And they have a right to do that. Even though rent controlled under the Ellis Act, they have a right to do that. Aunque tiene control de renta, una de las razones que se puede desalojar a una persona bajo control de renta es el acto Ellis que permite convertir en condominios o demoler y reconstruir otra cosa. So they definitely had a right to do that, but they made a mistake. Habían cometido un error. So we were going to win this case and they were to start again. Íbamos a ganar este caso y empezar de nuevo. Other leverage. Well, we actually did do extensive discovery, and we had a jury demand. Tenía caso en frente del jurado that we didn't even need because the technical defect was so obvious. El defecto técnico era muy obvio, ni siquiera necesitábamos el jurado. And there was no attorney's fees provision, y no había nada que hablaba de cuotas de abogado en el contrato. The client was collectible, but we were going to win, so that didn't matter much. El cliente tenía buen trabajo, así es que íbamos a ganar, así es que eso no importa. The players, experienced lawyers on both sides. We had a decent judge. Abogados con experiencia en ambos lados. Juez que es justo, donde podíamos ganar y casi seguro íbamos a ganar. The client was very likable, muy agradable la cliente. Can we win? ¿Podíamos ganar? Absolutamente. We took that deal, even though I recommended against it. Yo recomendé que esperar antes de aceptar. Why? Because part of what we had figured out is that they had a construction loan that required them to start construction by a specific date. Tenían un préstamo que requería que empezaran a construir X fecha. If we won and they had to start all over, they were going to miss that deadline. Si ganamos y tenían que empezar de nuevo con el desalojo, iban a no cumplir con ese plazo. That would have required them to get a brand new loan. Hubiera requerido un nuevo préstamo and a lot of penalties y penalidades. I asked someone who was a developer to look at it all, and they estimated that by sticking it out, we would be costing the landlord $300,000 to start again. Me dieron un estimado un experto en construcción y desarrollo urbano que si no aceptábamos el trato, iba a perder $300,000 el dueño. Okay? So I wanted my client to hold out for $200,000. Yo quería que mi clienta no aceptara menos de $200,000. But at $100,000, that was her breaking point. 100,000 era su punto. So, in my opinion, that wasn't the best deal I could get her in that case. En mi opinión, no era el mejor trato que podía lograr en ese caso. I think I could have gotten her if she had been better at poker, chicken, and let's make a deal. Si ella hubiera tenido menos nervios en jugar poker, chicken y let's make a deal, podríamos probablemente lograr $200,000. But it was her case. Era caso de ella. She's the one that has to live with the consequences if I'm wrong. Ella tiene que vivir con las consecuencias si estoy equivocada. So I obviously respected, obviamente hay que respetar what her limit was, lo que era su límite. And she was very happy and she was able to buy a house. Muy contenta salió y pudo comprar una casa. Okay? So again, it's not so clear cut, right? No es tan clear cut, tan blanco y negro. One of the things I think we need to do better with our clients, and we're going to start doing that, is doing this analysis with them, haciendo este análisis con ellos. I calculate it in my head and make a recommendation, but I don't always show you the math. Lo calculo en mi cabeza y hago recomendaciones, pero nunca no siempre soy consistente en explicar cómo llegué a esa posición. Okay, so it's 11:04 because I took a lot more time in that part of the presentation. And so I'm going to shoot through this very, very quickly. Voy a rápidamente explicar lo demás. So the notice starts the process. There's all kinds of different kinds of notices. La notificación empieza el proceso y hay muchas diferentes. And whether or not you have a defense to that notice depends principally on where you live. Si tienen una defensa a esa notificación depende principalmente en dónde viven. So this is the county of Los Angeles. You need to know where you live. El condado de Los Ángeles necesitan saber dónde viven. A lot of Angelinos don't know where they live. Muchos gentes de Los Ángeles no saben dónde viven. At the start of the pandemic, there was this guy on Facebook ranting and raving how he had put his landlord in his place because he told him all about how Eric Garcetti was protecting the people. Eric Garcetti is the mayor of Los Angeles. This is the red part. This guy lived in Pomona, which is somewhere out here. Nothing to do with what was happening in Los Angeles. Ese inquilino vive en Pomona, no en Los Angeles. Hay que saber dónde vive uno. The gray areas in this map are the 80, so let me start this way. Los Angeles was once its own entity all by itself, one government. Los Ángeles era una entidad, una jurisdicción con su propio gobierno. Slowly cities started to form, 88 of them. Poco a poco se desarrollaron ciudades, 88. So sometimes I ask someone, where do you live? I live in the city of Hollywood. There is no city of Hollywood. Hollywood is a neighborhood in the city of Los Angeles. I live in the city of Reseda. There's no city of Reseda. Reseda is a neighborhood in the city of Los Angeles. Gente me dice, vivo en la ciudad de Hollywood o en la ciudad de Reseda o en la ciudad de Pacoima. Esos son vecindarios adentro de la ciudad de Los Ángeles. There are 87 other cities, and that's the gray. Hay 87 otras ciudades, so es lo gris. And any area that has not incorporated is in white. y cualquier área que sigue no incorporada como una ciudad es lo blanco. So there is a rent stabilization law in the county that protects only the white areas. Hay una ley de estabilización en el condado que protege las áreas blancas. And there are laws in Baldwin Park, Beverly Hills, Culver City, Inglewood, Los Angeles, Santa Monica, and West Hollywood. Y hay leyes en estas ciudades que acabo de nombrar. There's an eviction protection law in Glendale, but they can raise the rent to whatever they want. And so it's not a very strong law. Una ley contra desalojos en Glendale, pero pueden subir la renta a lo que quieran, así es que no es una ley muy fuerte. And if none of these laws apply, si ninguna de estas leyes aplican, then the State Tenant Protection Act covers any unit that is at least 15 years old. La ley estatal cubre cualquier unidad que tiene 15 años, but it doesn't protect single-family homes and condos unless they are corporate owned. No protege a la casa particular ni al condominio, con la excepción de que una corporación es el dueño. And it doesn't protect duplexes if the owner lives in the second unit. Y no protege el duplex si el dueño vive en la otra unidad. And none of these laws protect hospital beds, board and care facilities, student housing, government subsidized housing, and cooperatives. Ninguna de esas leyes protege la cooperativa, vivienda costeable, subsidiada por el gobierno, vivienda para estudiantes en universidades, hospitales o board and care, que son los lugares donde mandamos a las personas discapacitadas y ancianas. Okay? So, then once we figure out where you live, we have to figure out if you are protected by your law. Ya que desarrollamos a dónde viven, tenemos que descifrar si su ley los protege. For instance, in Los Angeles, ejemplo, en Los Ángeles, the Los Angeles law doesn't protect any unit unless it's built after October of 1978. Nada más before. Nada más protege unidades que se construyeron antes de octubre del 78. So if your unit was built after October of 1978, you're not protected by this law. Si su unidad se construyó después de octubre del 78, no están protegidos por esta ley. So then we have to ask ourselves, does the Tenant Protection Act protect? Tenemos que descifrar si esta ley estatal protege. Okay. In addition to this scheme, adicional a este esquema de leyes, we have to figure out what COVID protections apply. Necesitamos ver qué protecciones bajo COVID aplican. So what protections does the state law give you? ¿Qué protecciones les dan las leyes estatales? We know that they are now ended. However, some protection remains, including the requirement that before the landlord try to evict you, they have to apply for rental assistance. Protección todavía hay, incluso el hecho de que antes de poder archivar un caso de desalojo, el dueño tiene que aplicar para la ayuda de pagar las rentas. Then of the 40 of these 88 cities have their own laws under COVID. 40 de estas ciudades tienen sus propias leyes bajo COVID. And if the local law is not as strong as the county law protects. Si la ley local no es tan fuerte como la del condado, la ley del condado protege. But then just this week, we got a terrible decision out of Lancaster. Esta semana recibimos una decisión horrible en la Corte de Lancaster that the county law is preempted by the state law, que la ley del condado está cancelada por la ley estatal, está cancelada por esta, because of the way the supervisors were extending and extending and extending, porque la manera en que extendían mes a mes, they were extending it month to month, and then they started extending it every 2 months, extendían mes a mes y luego cada 2 meses, and the state law says that if a law didn't exist before this law was passed, then it's invalid. La ley estatal dice que si una ley no existía cuando se pasó esta ley es inválida. We read that to mean that the rent protection stuff is invalid. Nosotros pensamos que nada más es inválido la parte de no pagar la renta, but this judge invalidated a 60-day notice, no cause, based on that argument. Este juez invalidó una nota de 60 días sin motivo o causa usando ese argumento. And we don't know what the other judges in the system are going to do. Alex, who just came in. Alex came in. Alex, que acaba de... Póngase en mudo, por favor. Mute yourself, please. Kevin, can you stop recording for a second? And that again goes to the unpredictability of the process. Eso también nos lleva al tema de la falta de predecibilidad de este proceso. So you have to develop your courage. Tienen que desarrollar su valor, okay? Su coraje. Another unpredictable point is this CDC order. Another example of unpredictability is the CDC order. Otro ejemplo de la falta de predecibilidad es la orden del CDC. So, in I think September, the CDC issued this order. Que creo que en septiembre el CDC hizo una orden que no se podían desalojar a las personas por falta de pagar renta o sin motivo o por una razón donde el inquilino no tenía culpa. So it protected tenants from evictions for non-payment of rent, or for evictions without a reason, or for a reason where the tenant hadn't done anything wrong. And so really this law protects, and most of the state laws had those same protections at the time. Las leyes estatales tenían las mismas protecciones en ese tiempo. The county law had that protection, la ley del condado. So for most tenants in LA County, the CDC order didn't give us anything extra. Para la mayor parte de los inquilinos en el condado, la orden del CDC no nos daba nada extra. But if your eviction started before the pandemic, si su desalojo empezó antes de la pandemia, that was your only protection. Eso era su única protección. I estimate that there were probably between 1,000 and 2,000 families in LA County being protected by that order. Aproximadamente entre 1,000 a 2,000 familias en el condado de Los Ángeles protegidas por esa orden. We had about 258 of them on our docket. Nosotros teníamos, EDN tenía más o menos 258. And we had been working with them to find places to go. So when the Supreme Court about a month ago declared this order unconstitutional, we had to scramble to figure out how to help about 25 families not be homeless immediately. Tuvimos que despabilarnos para proteger a como 25 familias que eran nuestros clientes. I'm very proud of how we handled those cases. Me da mucho orgullo. Very difficult situations y situaciones muy difíciles. Okay. So this is what notices look like. Eso es como se ven las notas. People often say, it isn't signed. They just printed their name. No lo firmaron. Nada más imprimieron su nombre. A signature is not required. No se requiere una firma. No hay una, it's not officially stamped. No tiene una estampa oficial. It doesn't require it. They got it off the internet. Lo bajaron del internet. That's where people get the notices. It has to have required language. And if it doesn't have that required language as a defense, it is a defense to the eviction. Tiene que decir ciertas cosas, y si falta algo o no está bien dicho, es una defensa. And Eden doesn't tell landlords when there's errors in their notices. Eden no le dice a los abogados cuando hay errores en las notificaciones. Why? Because they'll just fix it and serve you another one and you lose that defense. Porque lo arreglan, le dan otra y ya no tenemos esa defensa. We think it gets our clients more time to let them file the eviction action, que archiven el caso de desalojo. We defend it, lo defendemos, and we use that error as leverage in the negotiation. Usamos ese error como una palanca en la negociación. The notice has to be given to you in person, and if you're not home, They can give it to an occupant and send you a copy in the mail. And if no one is home, they can post it on the door and mail it regular mail. This is also regular mail. They can also, they're supposed to, under the law, bring it to your place of business, but there's a lot of cases that say, that's not necessary. Bajo la ley tienen que también tratar de dárselos en donde trabajan, pero hay casos interpretando esta ley que dicen que eso no es necesario. The most common way of serving is number 3. La manera más común es número 3. Tenants feel harassed by notices, and you need to learn how to control those emotions. Los inquilinos se sienten hostigados por las notificaciones y en realidad se tienen que controlar esas emociones. I'm a big believer that no one can make me feel bad or in any way unless I give them permission. Nadie me puede hacer sentir mal o enojada o triste si no les doy permiso. I am a master of my emotions. Tengo que ser la maestra de mis emociones. You can't control everything that happens to you. No pueden controlar lo que les pasa. You can control 2 things. Pueden controlar 2 cosas. Number 1 is how you respond to it. You have to respond smart. ¿Cómo responden? Tienen que responder de una manera inteligente. So when you get a notice, it is not smart to ignore it. Reciben una nota, no es inteligente ignorarla. It's not smart to get mad. No es inteligente enojarse. It's not smart to go and yell at your landlord or the person that gave it to you. No es inteligente ir a gritarle a la persona que te los dieron. What is smart is to follow the instructions I'm going to give you for where to get help, which I'm going to do it right now. And if I can get someone to put it in the chat, lo voy a hacer ahorita otra vez. Pónganlo en el chat. When you get a notice, you come to one of the webinars. Vienen a uno de los webinarios. You listen again to the presentation. Escuchan otra vez la presentación. I get so annoyed when people say, well, I've already gone 3 times, but you're asking me a question that we answered 10 times in each of those presentations. So you might have gone, but you weren't paying attention. Okay, so go again. La gente me hace preguntas que cubrimos 10 veces en cada presentación. Me dicen que han ido 3 veces, pues necesitan ir 3 veces más para entender lo que está pasando. Okay. So go to the webinars, stay connected with us. Join your tenants union, join ACE or Tenants Together, and come to my to my office hours if none of that solves it. Así es que los pasos inteligentes cuando alguien recibe una nota no es enojarse, no es asustarse, no es ir a gritarle al dueño, no es sentirse frustrado, sino venir a un taller, no importa cuántas veces han venido, tener otra consulta de 1 a 1 o al final de un taller o en mis office hours y seguir nuestras instrucciones. The other smart response is follow our instructions. You have no idea how many, like someone will come every week. They ask me the same question every week. And then I ask them, okay, so have you sent the declaration? You've been here, you got the notice. Now, something like 20 days ago, have you sent it? Oh, no, not yet. I'm sorry, why not? I told you to send it the first time you came. Me dice, no, todavía no. ¿Por qué no? Les dije que lo mandaron el primer día. And then they miss the deadline. Se les va el plazo because the next day something happened and they couldn't do it. Porque era el último día, el día siguiente. Esperaron hasta el último momento y se les fue el plazo. Okay? Please follow the instructions. Don't leave things to the last minute. Sigan las instrucciones y no dejen todo al último momento. Now, you're going to feel nervous. You're going to feel anxious. But you also can control that to some extent. Pueden controlar eso. And for that, we have Jaylin who can both, I am a child of displacement. So this is why I do this work. Yo también fui desplazada de niña 2 veces, twice, y por eso hago este trabajo. But I also am a housing secure person. Ahorita estoy muy segura en mi vivienda. Someone who has a recent experience dealing with the stress and anxiety is a better person to help teach you how to control that stress and anxiety. And that's why we have Jaylin talk during these webinars. Alguien que ha tenido la experiencia recién de la instabilidad en su vivienda, es alguien que puede mejor explicar cómo superar ese miedo, ¿ok? But you do need to overcome that fear. Otherwise, you will make bad decisions. Necesitan superar ese miedo o van a hacer malas decisiones. And courage is not the absence of fear. El coraje o el valor no es que no tienen miedo. It's the ability to overcome the fear. Es la habilidad de superar el miedo. Okay, I didn't make that up. Some important philosopher came up with that. Okay, so people often complain that they got so many of them, and they feel that or experience that as harassment. La gente dice, ay, es que me mandaron tantos, y eso es hostigamiento. It's actually making sure you get it. Es actualmente asegurándonos que reciban la nota. They give one to every adult in the household. Cada adulto en el apartamento, en la vivienda, tiene derecho a una nota, and one to anybody else we may not know of, or otherwise known as the unnamed occupants. Y una a cualquier persona que no conocemos, que son los ocupantes no nombrados. Oh my God, they posted on the door, it was open, all my neighbors saw it, invasion of my privacy. You know, maybe we didn't think it through. I actually was a child when this law was passed, but the law requires them to post it so that we make sure you see it. La ley requiere que lo pongan abierto para que lo vean. They brought it to my place of business. It was embarrassing. Lo trajeron a mi negocio, me dio pena. Truthfully, they brought it to your place of business to embarrass you. Es la razón que lo mandaron, but the law actually requires that they do that. La ley requiere que lo hagan. These are the most common notices. Esas son las notificaciones más comunes. Pay or quit, cure or quit, stop violating your lease or quit for nuisance, quit, no reason stated. That's usually a 30 or a 60-day notice. Some sort of no-fault notice under rent stabilization, like owner wants to move in themselves or move in a resident manager. Termination of Section 8, 90 days. And Ellis notice, you're in a rent stabilized unit, they want to demolish, take it off the market, convert it to condos, 120-day notice with a possibility of 1-year extension. Esas son las más comunes: pagar o salirse, dejar de violar el contrato o salirse por una molestia tan grave que no se puede remediar, salirse sin ninguna razón, normalmente de 30 o 60 días, salirse aunque no han hecho nada mal porque el dueño quiere vivir ahí o va a poner un manejador en su unidad, terminar el subsidio de sección 8, o están en una unidad protegida por control de renta, pero van a demoler y construir condominios o demoler y construir otra cosa y tienen mínimo derecho a 120 días con una posibilidad de una extensión de 1 año si son personas ancianas o discapacitadas. And this is what the notices look like. Así es como se ven. I'm not going to explain them this time. Usually I go through and I point out defects in them. If you haven't paid rent during the pandemic, please use this declaration. Keep sending it. Just add October, add November. Sigan mandándolos para octubre, noviembre. Even though these state laws are over, this is a good way of informing your landlord that you are still in financial distress. Aunque ya se vencieron estas leyes, es buena manera de informar a su dueño que todavía están en un caso de emergencia. As I said earlier, if you come to the workshop at 1, we'll explain this in detail and how it works. Si vienen al taller a las 1, explicamos en detalle cómo evitar el desalojo. We explain these laws that you've already heard. And what I'm going to say to you is that for now, the best thing to do at the notice stage is to come to a webinar. Lo mejor cosa que puede hacer al nivel de una notificación es venir a un webinario, so that we can, so that you can learn more, para aprender más, but also to be connected with a consultation one-on-one with a lawyer para ser conectados con una consulta con un abogado. And so I'm going to skip all of this in detail because we mainly talk about it at the 1 o'clock webinar, porque es el sujeto del webinario de la 1. An exception to the we don't open cases at the notice stage is the 120-day Ellis notice. La nota de 120 días por el acto Ellis. If you organize your building, we will work with you at the notice stage. Si organizan su edificio, trabajamos con ustedes al nivel de la notificación. Why? Because we want to make sure everyone gets the 1-year extension, para asegurar que todos obtienen la extensión de 1 año. Because it's an opportunity to prepare tenants for home ownership. Porque es una oportunidad de prepararlos a ustedes a usar este proceso para poder comprar una casa. And because it's an opportunity to fight to save the building. Es una oportunidad de luchar para salvar el edificio. It requires organizing and tenant power. Requiere organizarse, poder de inquilinos, and then you will be with your lawyer, van a estar con su abogado, trabajando para, working to save the building or to help people get into homeownership. Luchando para salvar el edificio o para que compren. So again, we are the Eviction Defense Network. We are part of the Right to Counsel Coalition. Somos la red de defensa de desalojo, parte de la coalición para el derecho a un abogado. This coalition has formed this website. Esta coalición ha desarrollado este sitio web. If you like this workshop, come back and also go to the one on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and 1. O vayan a la de martes, jueves, sábado a la 1. Can I get all those workshops back up in the chat, please? Jalen or Kevin or Harriet. And keep coming back. Y sigan regresando. When you can also click on this website here and find other workshops. Pueden enlazarse aquí y encontrar otros talleres. I recommend that you go to a lot of different workshops. I think we have 2 or 3 workshops a day going on as a coalition. Tenemos 2 o 3 al día como coalición. So go to a workshop, vayan, and learn more, aprendan más. And if you hear something at a workshop or anywhere else that is different from what I have told you, si oyen a alguien en un taller, algo en un taller que es diferente a lo que les he dicho, do not argue with the presenter. No se pongan tu por tu con el presentador. Take good notes. Tomen buenas notas and return to one that I am doing. Y regresen a un taller que estoy haciendo. And raise it to me or tell it to me at office hours. O me dicen in office hours. All of these workshops are supposed to be giving the same information. Nos ponemos de acuerdo los abogados cuál es la ley, misma información. And so either I need to correct them or I need to correct myself. O tengo que corregirlos a ellos o tengo que corregir mi presentación. But don't argue with the other presenters. No se pongan tú por ti con los otros presentadores. Just come and tell me so I can fix the problem. Vengan a decirme para poder corregir el problema. Okay? And if you want services from Eden, si quieren servicios de EDN, and your case is in the Downtown Court, Pasadena, West Covina, or Compton Court, for Compton you have to be an LA resident. Si sus casas están en esas cortes, you can go to edn.la, fill out the eviction prevention form, wait for a response, fill it out once and only once. We've corrected the problem with the error message, I think. But if you get an error message, ignore it. We are getting it. And if you don't get a response, then come on any Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, 6 p.m. to my office hours link. Okay? Así es que si sus casos están en Mosque, Downtown, Pasadena, West Covina o Compton, pero acá Compton tienen que ser residentes de la ciudad de Los Ángeles, vayan a edn.la, llenen el formulario, esperen una respuesta, llénenlo una vez solamente, y si nadie les responda, vengan a mis horas de oficio, lunes, miércoles y viernes a las 6. It's the same link for this webinar. Es el mismo enlace que este webinario. Please don't sign in any earlier than 5:55. No se enlacen más temprano de las 5:55. Someone signed in to be the first person in line at 2:56 yesterday. Alguien se enlazó a las 2:56. I'm using the Zoom for other reasons. So I've got this person in the waiting room. It's annoying. It's like distracting, right? Es una distracción. Sign in at 5:55. Don't sign in any earlier than that. No se enlacen a más temprano de las 5:55. Not to mention that when you sign in, I get an email alert. Cuando se enlazan, recibo una alerta. I don't have time to go in there and explain to you that it's not time yet. No tengo tiempo de ir a explicarles. So please don't do that. For other courts, you go to Stay Housed LA or you dial this number. Para otra cortes, o Stay Housed LA o este número. It is better if you go straight to stayhousedla.org than dial the number because this has a long waiting list. The digital divine number has a long waiting list. Este número tiene una grande lista de espera. A lot of people will say, oh, but I can't do the internet. I don't know how to go on the internet. Mucha gente dice, es que no tengo capacidad para el internet. You need to develop that capacity. Necesitan desarrollar esa capacidad. If you don't have a smartphone, you can get one at safelink.com. Si no tienen un smartphone, cómprense uno en safelink.com and get someone to teach you how to use it y que alguien les aprenda a usarlo. To say in this day and age that you can't get on a website is the same thing as saying, I can't make a phone call, okay? You need to learn, necesitan aprender. Es como decir, no puedo usar un teléfono. We live in a digital world. You will get left behind if you don't catch up. Vivimos en un mundo digital. Los vamos a dejar allá atrás si no aprenden. And ACE teaches their members. The tenants unions get their people connected. Los sindicatos inquilinos y ACE ayudan a sus miembros a superar esa debilitación, que en realidad es una debilitación. If you are being immediately and illegally locked out, si al momento los están echando a fuerzas, ilegalmente, sin proceso de corte, illegal, without court process, happening right now, you can dial this number. Pueden marcar este número. Please don't dial that number to get an update on your case. People have figured out that it rings most of the time into my cell phone. La mayor parte de este número llega a mi celular. And I've had a couple of clients last week call to get an update on their case on that number. I am a very nice person, except when I am not. And when people do stuff like that, man, it makes me really angry because we are working very, very hard to help a lot of people. And that tells me that you are not a team player, right? If you need an update on your case, office hours. Si quieren un update en su caso, vengan a office hours, okay? These are the links to the webinars, los enlaces para los webinarios y para office hours. And I'm gonna just show you, this is what the papers look like. Eso es lo como se ven los papeles. This is the summons. Esa es la citación judicial. And I'm going to skip all of this. This is the courtesy notice from the court. La carta de cortesía de la corte. This one comes in the mail. The summons is supposed to be brought to your door. Esa viene por correo. La situación judicial viene a su puerta. If you get this one, don't ignore it. Si reciben esta notificación, no la ignoren. Wait a day or two to see if they come and bring it to you at your door. Esperen un par de días para ver si se los traen a la puerta. But if they don't, go to the court, get a copy, and then apply for services. Si no, se los traen en un par de días, vayan a la corte, obtengan su copia y apliquen para servicios. We don't want to get into a pissing match with a process server about whether or not they brought it to their door. That's a contest you're not likely to win. No queremos entrar en un tú por tú en corte. Es que no me dieron el papel y luego profesor de una persona que es un profesional dice que se los dieron en la mano, el juez les va a creer a ellos. Así es que mejor contestar. It's better to just answer. This is another example of other forms that come. This is the complaint. This is the landlord's side of the story. Esta es el lado del dueño. This is the answer. Esta es la respuesta that you fill out. This is a request for entry of default. If you don't file an answer, the other side will file this with the court, so you lose automatically. Si no archivan una respuesta, el otro lado va a archivar este papel con la corte para que pierdan automáticamente. Hay muchos pasos en el proceso. There are many, many steps in the process. And it's important that you cooperate with your lawyers to avoid getting this notice to vacate. Es importante que cooperen con sus abogados para evitar esta notificación. This person can be locked out the day after this date. El sheriff puede venir el día después de esta fecha. They don't usually come the next day. Normalmente no vienen el día siguiente. But in the pandemic, I've seen it happen 3 or 4 times. En la pandemia ha pasado 3 o 4 veces. I have a couple of cases downtown where the notices expired October 2nd and tenants got to us late and we're trying to save their housing, and maybe we will on Tuesday and maybe we won't, because those notices are very ripe, but we will still try. Vamos a tratar. Hay gente que tiene notas que se vencieron 2 familias el 2 de octubre y llegaron a nosotros tarde. Y vamos a intentar el 12 de octubre para parar el sheriff. Es posible que el sheriff venga cuando estamos en la corte. It's possible on those notices that expired 10 days. So they expired the 2nd. So by the time we're in court on the 12th, it'll be 10 days later. They may get locked out in the morning while we are in court in the afternoon. Quizás los echan en la mañana mientras que estemos en corte en la tarde. That notice to vacate comes with these 3 other pages. Esa nota tiene las 3 páginas. I will ask someone, please send me the notice to vacate, and they will literally send me page 1. Me mandan la página 1. Necesito las 4 páginas, por favor. I need all 4 of them. This is something we can file to stop the sheriff. Algo que podemos archivar para parar el sheriff, but you have to qualify. Tienen que calificar, and it doesn't always work, y no siempre funciona. So if you get anything that looks anything like that, immediately reach out for help. Inmediatamente tienen que enlazarse para ayuda. You do that the way I described earlier. Lo hacen como lo describí antes. If you see this posted on the door, it means the sheriff has already locked you out. Si ven esto en su puerta, el sheriff ya los echó. If you break in, si entran, it's a misdemeanor felony wobbler. Puede ser que los prosecuten como felonía o delito menor. We don't recommend that people you have to keep that in mind, right? You can end up in a worse situation. Pueden acabar en una peor situación. The Right to Housing Coalition is representing in all 11 of these courts. Esta coalición está representando en las 11 cortes: West Covina, Pasadena, Compton, Long Beach, Norwalk, Mosque, Lancaster, Van Nuys, Chatsworth, Santa Monica, and Inglewood. These are all the courts in the county of Los Angeles that handle evictions. Son todas las cortes en el condado que manejan desalojos. Eden represents in West Covina, Pasadena, Mosque, and Compton, but only for LA residents in Compton. Representamos en esas cortes, West Covina, Pasadena, Mosque, Compton, en la corte de Compton, solamente residentes de Los Angeles. If your case is in another court, we will not be able to help you. We don't have enough lawyers. Si su caso está en otra corte, no vamos a poder ayudarles. No tenemos suficientes abogados. And if you go into the Stay Housed LA website and get assigned to another agency, we also won't be able to represent you because we already have too many cases. Si son asignados por medio de Stay Housed LA a otra corte, ya tenemos demasiados casos y no vamos a poder ayudarlos. Okay, So if your case is in one of these courts, West Covina, Pasadena, Musk, or Compton, City of LA residents only for Compton. Si su caso está en una de esas 4 cortes and you want us to represent you y quieren que nosotros los representemos, then what we want to do is go to stayhousedla.com. Queremos ir a stayhousedla.com. Perdón. Give me 1 second. That was wrong. You have to go to edn.la, edn.la. This is what our website looks like. Este es nuestro sitio web. Please make sure it's that simple, edn.la. It's not edn.org. It's not edn anything other than edn.la. And you go and you fill out this van y llenan este formulario. Here you put, how did you hear about us? You put something like, I attended X webinars from the Pasadena Tenants Union. I am an ACE member. Nos dicen cómo escuchar nosotros. And a little bit of detail about your case. Un poquito de detalles sobre su caso. It's a very short questionnaire. You submit it. And you might get an error message. If you do, ignore it. It generates an email to us. Genera un correo electrónico. If nobody responds to you, so let me ask this question out loud. If nobody responds to your request for help, what are you supposed to do? ¿Qué tienen que hacer? Nobody knows?
Yeah, you have to come to an afternoon class. I think it's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 p.m. I might be wrong.
You're right about that. You come to office hours. It's not a class. It's a one-on-one. No es una clase, es uno a uno. You'll get a message. The host will let you in soon. I let people in one at a time. Los dejo entrar uno a la vez. And then you can get a consultation. I go and I look it up and see why we haven't answered you. And then I answered you right on the spot. Los contesto ahí mismo. So I think that pretty much ends it. So let's stop recording.